Injuries have started to strike for the Seahawks here in August, in particular at the tight end position. We'll be diving into some key injuries at that spot and some reinforcements brought in here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be linking back up with my co-host in crime, Rob Rang, and a special thanks to all the 12s who are listening in, whether you are in Othello, Washington, Des Moines, Iowa, each and every one of you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. The Seahawks moving to 1-1 in the preseason on Saturday night with a 16-15 loss to the Titans. We're going to dish out our first Monday musings of the year, revisiting everything that went down in that preseason defeat in Nashville. And it's part 3 of our 53-man roster revisions. We'll be looking at our updated last 5 in, first 5 out, and updated depth charts, all courtesy of our friends at FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can get or bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Now for your lead story here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Knock on wood, the Seahawks have, for the most part, been pretty healthy here in this first training camp at preseason under Mike Macdonald. But as is the case for every team in the league, those injuries are starting to mount up, and in particular at the tight end position. Pharaoh Brown being the most significant one, had to be carted off the field at the second joint practice last week in Nashville with what the Seahawks and the player himself are calling a foot injury. He actually posted a video on Instagram today showing the bruising on his foot. He is getting a second opinion done on that injury, and he's still hoping he's going to be ready for the start of the regular season. That seems like that might be a bit optimistic considering he's having to go for a second opinion on that foot, but you couple Noah Fant being banged up. Jack Westover's now got a hamstring injury. They don't know the severity there. 3 tight ends down. Not a surprise the Seahawks added 2 players to their depth chart at that position with one more preseason game to go.
Yeah, it's not at all a surprise, Corbin, given the injury issues, as you just mentioned. And Seattle signed 2 players that, while their backgrounds are certainly different, they have very similar size, both roughly at 6'5", 245 pounds. Michael Ezike from UCLA has also spent some time in the UFL and in some NFL camps. Devin Garrison from Pittsburgh State, same kind of story, was actually with the Green Bay Packers and Minnesota Vikings in their respective rookie camps earlier this year as well. Just looking at these 2 players from the outset, I think that Michael Ezike, because of the fact that he played at UCLA, then there's going to be some familiarity with some Pac-12 fans, especially anybody who watches Ezike and the UCLA Bruins when they went against their crosstown rivals USC Trojans a couple of years ago. And Ezike caught 3 touchdowns in one game. So it certainly has had some big time moments. It's kind of funny too, because he's got some new teammates that were former teammates at UCLA. Every one of those 3 touchdowns that Ezike pulled in, it was off of play action where the Bruins were understandably going to give the ball to Zach Charbonnet. Again, there's some familiarity there. I think that's kind of interesting. What I like about Ezike is, again, 6'5", 245 pounds. He's got 4.7-ish kind of speed, good speed. He can run down the seam and create some matchups there. He's got really long arms, and he's stronger at the point of attack than you might expect, given that kind of almost a wide receiver like frame. And that's actually the position that he started his college career at, was at wide receiver. So he is a little bit of a developmental prospect in that regard. But also, again, more of a blocker than I thought based on his measurables. When I watched him on tape, he is physical at the point of attack. So he's going to give Seattle something that way. When you're talking about Devin Garrison, again, you're talking about Pittsburgh State. This is a D2 school, a two-time All-American there, and actually, turned some heads with his ability just to make the unbelievable catch. I mean, if you want to see one-handed grabs, then watch Devin Garrison's tape. This is a guy who can absolutely pluck the football, and while he does not have the most impressive 40-yard dash time, and for a little side note, seeing he and Jake Bobo go head-to-head in a 40-yard dash race could be interesting. What he does have is, like Bobo, again, terrific ball skills, and he's got some savviness to him, some lateral agility to him that allows him to get open. So, again, I think that these are probably two guys that, clearly are on the outside looking in at this point in time, but at the same time, they also have some legitimate talent to them. And in the Seahawks, as you mentioned, have had the injury problems. They have a tight end. So kudos to them for finding some players that might actually be able to help the squad.
Yeah, this really boils down to you got to have enough guys to play on Saturday against the Cleveland Browns at home. And right now, Brady Russell, you've got Tyler Mabry, you've got A.J. Barner. Those are the only three tight ends that are kind of healthy right now for the Seahawks going into this game that have been on the roster. So Zeke and Garrison are both going to get a chance here to kind of do a crash course on Ryan Grubb's offense and play a lot of snaps on Saturday. And that's always a positive opportunity for any player. Maybe you can get seen by the right team, and maybe the Seahawks with their injury situations, maybe one of these guys can be a late riser that ends up getting onto the practice squad. So it's an opportunity. That's the best thing that you can put it at. It's an opportunity. But for the Seahawks, when it comes to the injuries here, from what I've gathered, Noah Fant is not a significant one. Right now, they are just kind of playing the caution card. They expect he's going to be ready for week 1. The same cannot be said with Pharaoh Brown. Now, as he said on his Instagram, he is hoping that he's going to be ready for week 1. I just think the fact that he's getting a second opinion on this injury, the fact he had to be carted off for it, it's more on the skeptical side for me that he's going to be able to get back quickly. This could very well be a candidate to stay on the roster initially during cuts and then be placed on injured reserve. And at that point, the Seahawks would have to figure out, do we want to pick up another tight end? Is Tyler Mabry now going to be on the active roster, or do we use that extra spot for another position on the roster? So this is a guy that's going to bring a lot of physicality to their offense. You're going to have to hope A.J. Barner can immediately step in as a rookie, as a fourth-round pick, and be able to fill that void, because the Seahawks don't really have anybody else on their roster. Neither one of these tight ends they just signed is going to be able to jump in and be Pharaoh Brown in terms of the inline blocker. A.J. Barner is the player best equipped to be able to do that. So that is going to put a lot more pressure on him. Players like Brady Russell and Tyler Mabry are more of the move tight end variety, which has a lot of value in Ryan Grubb's offense. He loves to slide Brady Russell over the formation. He could do that with Tyler Mabry if he wishes. Jack Westover if healthy, but those guys are not going to be playing a lot of snaps as inline tight ends. So this is a big opportunity for A.J. Barner to be able to show his worth as a fourth-round pick and carve out a significant role, especially if Brown ends up missing extended time, which I think at this point, I would be surprised if he isn't out for at least a month or two with this injury. We'll see what the update is, but it doesn't look like it's trending in a great direction, at least from what I'm seeing.
No, I 100% agree with you. And I think that that's excellent points that you were making there as far as what the specialties of the different tight ends that are currently on Seattle's roster. I do agree that A.J. Barner is the tight end who's going to be asked to play more of that blocking role. And, I think that's something that he is very well suited for. I mean, we saw what he could do at Michigan. Of course, Jay Harbaugh, the special teams coach, it's been public at this point that he was very excited about the possibility of reuniting with A.J. Barner because of his ability on special teams. I see A.J. Barner as a very similar player as a young Will Dissly, Corbin. So I think that he can play this role, but it is an awful lot of pressure to be putting on a fourth-round pick. Still, again, I do believe that A.J. Barner has the physicality in the running game, the reliable pass-catching ability in the short to intermediate range. You saw the physicality in the preseason game when he trucked over the Tennessee defender, kept his feet, and it's too bad that he ran out of sideline there, because that was a heck of an impressive play by him. But I really thought that Michael Robinson, the color play man on the broadcast, for those of you watching here locally, he did a terrific job of pointing out A.J. Barner and some of the blocks that he, as well as Tyler Mabry, were making here. And Tyler Mabry should not be a player that should be forgotten. So I'm happy that you mentioned him as well. So again, these are the typical bumps and bruises that every club is going to have happen. Unfortunately for the Seahawks right now, they feel a little bit snake bitten at that tight end position, but this is one of their deepest positions. And again, they got two quality football players. I think they're going to help them out this weekend as well.
When we come back, we are going to dish out our first Monday musings of the year. We're going into regular season mode because that's what the Seahawks are doing at their practices right now. So we're going to go into regular season mode with some final takeaways after revisiting the film from Saturday's loss to the Titans. We'll get to those coming up next here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience is what brings home the winning trophy and also keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, steering wheel covers, windshield wiper fluid. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for, and with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the most valuable player and bring home the win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit. Only available to U.S. customers. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s listening in. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. The Seahawks suffering their first loss of the Mike McDonald era. Granted, it's a preseason game, doesn't officially count in the standings, but a 16-15 defeat to the Titans in Nashville, a game that felt like it was very much in Seattle's control after one half of football. But look, this is the preseason. You start to put third, fourth, fifth, sixth stringers in. And this really was the default preseason game, Rob. No starters really playing for either team. So those are always going to be a crapshoot. At the end of the day, the Seahawks third team offense wasn't able to do anything and only put up 3 points in the second half. They lose by 1 on a game-winning field goal by Braden Narveson. So they're 1-1. There's still plenty of positives to pull out from this game, and it's not a regular season loss. It's not the end of the world. There were still a lot of good things that we saw on film. And I know in particular, with you being an offensive line guy, there were 3 players that really jumped out to you from that makeshift first offensive line that impressed in Nashville.
They really did impress, and I'm excited to talk about them, Corbin. And I will kind of reiterate what you just said there about that. It did feel like such a winnable game, and a big part of that was because of how well that Seattle's makeshift offensive line, as you put it, how they held up. And I specifically want to talk at the guard position. I really thought that the decision to start the rookie Christian Haynes, who, of course, as we've talked about so many times before, has primarily played at the right guard position, but to start Christian Haynes at left guard alongside of Anthony Bradford at the right guard position, and then at the right tackle position, McClendon Curtis. Those are the 3 players that I really wanted to focus in on. And Corbin, having watched the tape of every single player for Seattle's offense, defense, and special teams over the last couple of days, I can tell you that, at least in my opinion, Christian Haynes had the best day of any Seahawk, period. I thought he was absolutely spectacular at the left guard position. He was beaten technically. Some people are going to say that he was beaten for half a sack twice. Sam Howell in both cases basically ran up into the position, but otherwise, Christian Haynes manhandled 3 different Tennessee defensive tackles that they put on him. And I recognize that, as you said, I'm a little bit of an offensive line kind of a junkie. This is what I like. This is what I play. This is what I coached. And so I definitely enjoy the battles along the line of scrimmage. And I'm sure that there's very few of our listeners or viewers, and thank you as always, as Corbin often says, that would take the time to watch really closely that bit of tape. I'd ask you just to go to the touchdown throw, the Sam Howell through to Aesop Winston, which was a beautiful throw, a beautiful route, also beautiful pass protection. And in that one particular play, Christian Haynes actually is beaten a little bit by the Tennessee defensive tackle. He kind of gets under him, and he's going to his left, and Christian Haynes does this arm over just power move and pulls the defensive tackle to the ground. It is a demonstration of his raw power and his ability to recover if beaten initially that I think has got to have the Seahawks offensive line coaches and scouts just absolutely ecstatic about the future of this young man. So again, I'm really, really excited about Christian Haynes. I thought that Anthony Bradford was good, not quite as good. even though some analytic websites out there would argue that he was better, but he gave up a legitimate whiff, at least that I did not see. I did not see Christian Haynes give up. And then McClendon Curtis, the right tackle position, again, I was very impressed with what I saw just of his quickness. Now, it remains to be seen what's going to happen when you're playing the starters, as you mentioned a moment ago, Corbin, but still, especially Christian Haynes at the left guard position, and also good grades. I would give it absolutely an A for Christian Haynes at left guard, and B's for both McClendon Curtis at right tackle and Anthony Bradford at right guard. And again, recognizing just how bad Seattle's offensive line has been in so many games over the course of the last decade or two. And the fact that, again, this was not the starters, in some cases, that I really do think that this was a very encouraging sign from Seattle's young offensive line.
And I want to give a shout out to Anthony Bradford, because I know the play that you're talking about. There was a whiff, so I marked him down for that. But the run blocking that he had in that game for Kenny McIntosh, as a run game guy, like level, when you watch a 340-pound guard move a nose tackle like 4 yards immediately off the ball, and then get off that double team and immediately hit the linebacker, just nonchalantly take the linebacker. And I think nonchalantly is the perfect word. He looked like he was just kind of pushing a toddler. Just kind of tossed him off to the side for a pancake. Yeah. That was one of the best plays that I watched in this entire game. Just the execution. He took two dudes out of that play. One with just pure power. The other one, hey, I'm a lot bigger than you. I took a good angle. Linebacker runs right to me. I'm going to knock you on your duff. And it was really impressive. You cannot deny that he brings a different mentality to that run game. That is his strength. And, oh, by the way, 18 pass blocking reps. I didn't see a single pressure that he gave up. Same for Christian Haynes. So I think Seattle's got some discussions to have internally there. And I know Laken Tomlinson has not done anything to earn a demotion, but you can't tell me their coaching staff is not looking back at that film and saying, there might be a chance this is our starting combination, and at least at some point this year, because Haynes looks very comfortable at left guard. And I think Anthony Bradford has made major strides compared to what we saw last year, at least based on the training camp practices that I've watched. So I think that's interesting. There's also some competitions going on at receiver and cornerback, and for different reasons, they're now kind of open again. And I'll start with the positive side. It's a receiver position. It's because of Easop Winston and Cody White. Both these guys getting big plays in this game, showing off their hands. Winston with the touchdown, White with the 33-yard catch from Sam Howell, has some ability to break some tackles. Both these guys continue to make positive plays in the preseason games. I'm not going to go as far as saying that they have passed Derek Young. I still think Derek Young is the number 6 receiver, and there's a fairly decent margin there. But I do think that Easop Winston in particular, with his punt return ability, if he gets some opportunities to do that and he does well, Easop Winston could be a 7th receiver or be the 6th receiver that ends up making this roster. On the flip side at corner, it was a different story for me. I think that it's wide open in the back end because I didn't really feel like anybody stepped up in this football game. Nehemiah Pritchett was okay. He was solid. He didn't miss any tackles, didn't give up any huge plays in the passing game, but wasn't spectacular by any means. His college teammate and current teammate, DJ James, had a nightmare of a second preseason game. Did about everything you could do to hurt yourself when it comes to making a team as a bubble player. I didn't think Carlton Johnson played very well in this football game. Really, the only one that had a good game was D. Williams. D. Williams had a really nice pass breakup at the end, didn't give up any catches when he had his opportunities. But it just feels like that is more muddy than it was before because nobody stepped up. It's different than the receiver position where everybody seems to be elevating their game. You didn't see that from the cornerback group in this game. So you've got two competitions that now look very much open at the bottom of the depth chart, but for different reasons coming out of this game.
Yeah, no question about it. And I really think that D. Williams in particular, as you mentioned, had a spectacular performance. I mean, not only in coverage, he was, he did a nice job of tackling. And then the fact that, again, that he was basically their primary return man throughout the game. I mean, he was going back to his old stomping grounds in Tennessee, and there's an extra pressure in those types of situations. So kudos to him in particular for having a good game. There was one other young defensive back that I have to mention. I mentioned Sam Howell before. I could gush about Sam Howell and the way, just the consistent improvement that we've seen from him in terms of decision making, in terms of accuracy. I love the touchdown throw. I love the 33-yard strike, as you mentioned there, to Cody White. The other things that I really liked about it was the fact that there was one scramble in which it looked like Sam was going to throw the ball and try to make the hero play. And instead, you could just almost see his brain kind of process, nope, I'm going to get yelled at by my coaches. And so he took the ball and ran out of bounds, and the Seahawks had to punt. And it wound up being basically just, hey, a third and, and forget about it, instead of it being a possible turnover situation. So that is the type of growth that you're looking for from a young quarterback. So excited about that. But again, I get distracted, get all excited about some of these young players making improvements. As I said a moment ago, Corbin, I really thought that Christian Haynes at the left guard position was the best player on the field for the Seahawks. I think the second best player on the field was Ty Okada. I thought that the play that he made to intercept the ball is, again, the one that's going to get all of the highlights and all that kind of stuff. But some of the other tackles that he had, just the instincts, his weaving through traffic. He's a very effective blitzer for a guy who is listed at 5'11", 185 pounds. He's physical, and he kind of just kind of swivels his way through traffic to be able to get to the ball carrier. There was one where he was too aggressive and had a really aggressive pursuit angle and got beaten. But other than that, I thought that he was incredibly reliable in coverage, and just knowing the way that Mike Macdonald likes to rotate the safeties, or at least what we've seen him do in the past. I wonder if Ty Okada didn't play well enough to create a little bit of a change up in at least in my initial 53-man roster.
Yeah, I think that he has further elevated himself on the roster bubble food chain. I don't know if it means he gets on the roster, but he is an NFL player. You can see that. There were some flashes of this last year where you thought in the preseason, that kid has some ability. And you watch his college tape at Montana State, and you could see that ability. So I think his junkyard dog mentality, I mean, he was getting into it with Titan players throughout the week at joint practices. A few of my buddies that were in attendance said that he was jawing at him. He kind of fits what Mike Macdonald's looking for. So he's kind of on the radar there. A guy that is going to be on this roster, but seems to be trending upward at the linebacker position. We've seen John Radigan with his struggles in coverage. There were some plays that should have been big plays, and the quarterbacks for the Titans just didn't pull the trigger or weren't accurate. Patrick O'Connell has had some misses with the penalties. But Tyrese Knight, what a performance that he had on Saturday night. Led the team with 8 tackles. Like Mike Macdonald said afterwards, we know he can make tackles. You just didn't believe us. He was joking with the media about that. But we know the guy can tackle. It's about some of the other things that he is still trying to figure out at the NFL level. The blitzing, the coverage stuff, reading plays more astutely, playing the game at a slower speed in terms of mental capacity. You are starting to see some improvements, all those categories. The play that jumped out to me was the screen that he blew up. Yep. And I had to do a double take, even though he's a different body type, a little different athlete. I had to look and see if KJ Wright was underneath that helmet, because the way that he read and snuffed out that screen by the Titans and came up and just whacked the running back, got him down for a 5-yard loss, that looked KJ Wright-esque. And if the Seahawks can get those type of plays consistently from Tyrese Knight, who has more athletic ability than what KJ Wright ever had. This is a guy that's more of a sideline-to-sideline runner. He's got more pass rushing ability, can be more of a nuisance in the backfield. If you're getting those type of instinctive plays from him, then I really do think that the ceiling is above the clouds for this kid with Mike Macdonald coaching him. So I was really excited by what I saw. There's still plenty to work on. I want to see more in the pass rushing department. He hasn't had many opportunities to do that yet, but you're starting to see this kid grow up in front of your eyes, snap by snap, with the opportunities he's getting. And it almost feels like, with the comments Mike Macdonald has made, that the Seahawks are kind of holding out hope that this kid is going to have that light switch go on so they can get him into the lineup. I think Mike Macdonald wants to be able to find a way to play him. Heck, if Jerome Baker doesn't get healthy, it might be week 1 that we end up seeing Tyrese Knight out there against the Denver Broncos. We'll just have to wait and see. When we come back, speaking of 53-man rosters, we've already hinted at a couple potential changes. We're going to look at revisions, part 3, coming out of the second preseason game. Who do we have making the Seahawks roster? Are there any changes from this time a week ago? We're going to dive into that up next here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode of Locked On Seahawks is brought your way by FanDuel. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, from America's #1 sportsbook, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. With a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out of market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Bet on everything from Geno Smith's MVP odds to Byron Murphy II's Rookie of the Year chances to even Mike McDonald's Coach of the Year odds. Just throw in a $5 bet and you'll get a 3-week free trial to NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined as always by my co-host in crime, Rog Ring. And a special thanks to all the 12s as always. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. Switching gears now back to the 53-man roster. We've talked about Saturday's preseason game, the players that stood out, which ones maybe struggled a little bit, and how that may influence our 53-man roster projections. And Rob, when you get to this time of year, you and I will both acknowledge this. There aren't going to be 17 changes. There's not suddenly going to be 17 guys that were on the roster last week that are not this week. If there's going to be changes, it's going to be a handful of guys that maybe were on the wrong side of the bubble that now are on the right side of the bubble. Maybe there's some injuries that change the course of things. So real quick, let's go through our last 5 in, because I think this is the most important part. We're talking bubble players, who the last 5 guys on your roster are in this part 3 revision of our 53-man roster projections.
Well, the only change I have to the roster projection I had a week ago, Corbin, is as I mentioned before, I have the Montana State safety, Ty Okada, getting onto this roster. I also have Miles Adams, Mike Morris, D. Williams, and John Radigan, to me, are the last 5 in. And so, again, those are the players that I have just barely making it. The one player that unfortunately got dropped because of that is a very versatile offensive lineman that I'm very high on, and I know the Seahawks are as well, Raekwon O'Neal. I have him, DeVere Livingston, who saw early snaps, second quarter snaps, Aesop Winston, Lance Boykin, and a fellow corner, Carlton Johnson, as being the first 5 out. And what I mean by first 5 out is that those are the players who I believe are the ones that you don't want to leave. These are the guys that you are just acknowledging that they have NFL potential and that they might sign elsewhere. So just give them that tip of the cap and say, here, it didn't work here, but you have a chance elsewhere. So again, this is not the very first 5 guys I think the Seahawks are going to be releasing, or I'm projecting them to release. I think that any of the last 5 players I just mentioned also are very much have a shot to make the initial 53, and certainly will be strong practice squad candidates if that's the way it works out.
As far as my list for the last 5 in, D. Williams is the only addition to my list this week. And some may wonder, why is Kenny McIntosh still on this list? Because I just, based on conversations that I've had and the fact that George Halani is not hurt and he only played like 4 snaps in the game the other night, my viewpoint based on the conversations I've had, Rob, is the Seahawks feel they have already seen enough from George Halani in training camp. If they wanted to see more carries and more touches for him, they could manufacture those in preseason games. They wanted to put Kenny McIntosh out there, and he still had a rough night in pass protection. That is going to continue to be the one bugaboo for me when we're talking Kenny McIntosh. I love the way he's running the ball. I love how hard that he's running, the yards after contact. He can catch the football like a receiver. But I don't care if you can do those 2 things. As a third down back, if you cannot pass protect, you're not seeing the field for me. And I think that is still something that Ryan Grubb and the rest of this coaching staff, they're still a little bit irritated by. And so we're going to play you into the second half in this preseason game. And can you show us that you can make some blocks and pass protection? And I still have not seen a quality rep from him this preseason in that regard. So that's why he's still on this list. Many of the players I have on here are the same ones from a week ago. D. Williams, though, being the latest addition on this list. I like what I'm seeing at corner and his kick return ability, 41-yard return in this game. I just think that he might be the best kick returner on this entire roster. You want to keep him around. As far as my first 5 out go, Ty Okada jumps up to number 1 on the list for me. So I'm with you. He has improved his standing in my eyes. I just could not find a spot for him. He was the absolute last guy that I was trying to figure out how can I get him on the roster. Mike Jarrell was the only third-string lineman that I thought played well on Saturday night and had some good pass blocks. They didn't really try to run behind him, so I couldn't evaluate him much from that regard. But he was the only one that I didn't have a bunch of red flags from that third-team offensive line. So I thought Mike Jarrell improved his standing, but I'm still trying to figure out where he fits. If Abe Lucas is not ready week 1, Mike Jarrell is making this roster for me. That is going to be the next guy in line from that regard. That's the thing you have to know is with these last 5, our first 5 out, we got to be looking at positional players as well because Ty Okada, if you have a defensive back injury, it makes sense to bring him back. Aesop Winston, if you got a receiver, a kick returner injury. Some of these guys are very much squarely on the bubble, and you could have arguments either way, but these are the players that are just on the outside looking in for me. As far as the actual 53-man roster projections, Rob, I think you and I are both in the same club here right now. We are projecting that Pharaoh Brown is going to be on injured reserve to open the season. Now, does that mean he's done for the year? We can't speak to that. This could be an injury that keeps him out for 4 weeks, and then he's back. We don't know. But it seems hard to believe he's going to be ready for the season opener or even this first couple of games, given what we are learning about this foot injury.
Yeah, and that does create a much more interesting situation at tight end. I still have it basically being the same 3 tight ends that I had projected before. Noah Fant, Brady Russell, and A.J. Barner with, look, I really, again, am a big fan of what I've seen from some of Seattle's other tight ends on tape in college or in person, like in the case of Tyler Mabry and, of course, Pharaoh Brown. But I love the fact that you mentioned just the positional versatility and how important that is, and just the fact that you just need certain bodies. And again, I think this is unfortunate in a way because I'm sure that Christian Haynes probably is a buddy of Raekwon O'Neal's, but because Christian Haynes showed the positional versatility that I talked about a couple of moments ago, again, a career right guard, plays at left guard and is absolutely spectacular there, then I do think that gives Seattle a lot more flexibility at the guard position. You have McClendon Curtis, who's currently a backup at right tackle, who also can slide in and play guard. I had Raekwon O'Neal making the initial 53. I do believe that he is an NFL caliber offensive lineman. I love his positional versatility, but because I think that Christian Haynes has higher upside, McClendon Curtis as well, then I think that allows the Seahawks to perhaps get a little bit more creative. And again, Ty Okada is just too good of a football player not to make my initial 53. So again, that is the reason why I made that switch.
Yeah, I think that overall these rosters are going to look pretty similar to a week ago. And luckily there were not any other major injuries that were suffered in this preseason game. The starters for the most part weren't playing anyway. So things have not changed much for me other than Pharaoh Brown was on my roster last week. I do have him starting on injured reserve. I've still got all 4 running backs making this football team and the same receivers. Again, I think Aesop Winston is doing a great job. I don't know that Aesop Winston moves the needle enough away from playing receiver and returning kicks because I think Derek Young still can do a lot of things that Aesop Winston's not going to be able to do. And he is a core special teams player going down and tackling on kick and punt coverage. You can move him around the formation a lot more than what you can Aesop Winston. I just still think there's some things working against you. If you keep 7 receivers, Winston could absolutely be that guy if he's one of your kick returners, but I still think he's on the outside looking in. As far as the O-line goes, I'm still projecting Abraham Lucas to be ready in week 1. We did see that Connor Williams was practicing some today, so that is a positive sign for him to be ready in week 1. And with that, I'm only keeping 9 offensive linemen, with Mike Jarrell being the hardest one for me to cut. Stone Forsythe was, to me, the one weak link of the offensive line the other night on the first string offensive line. I didn't think that he had a bad game, but he had more mishaps than anybody else did up there. So I'm still wondering, is there a spot for him? If Abe Lucas is on the PUP list, then Forsythe has a good chance to make this roster. But I still think that it is far from a given that he is going to make this football team. And as for the defensive side of the ball, really no major differences for me other than I'm keeping 7 corners. I think Nehemiah Pritchett is a corner with his size and athleticism. The Seahawks don't want to risk losing him. He would be one of the few players that maybe gets plucked out by another team that needs corners. And I think D. Williams, I'm with you now. You had D. Williams on the roster last week. I did not. I love the pass breakup. I love the fact he'll come up and hit people. He's a football player. He's still trying to learn the corner position, but he's a football player. And you might not find a better kick and punt returner on this entire roster. His vision, his ability to follow blocks, the block that Laviska Shenault had on that kick return was amazing. Yep. I think those two are your kick returners to open season. And I think that the Seahawks coaching staff is starting to become more intrigued by what D. Williams could become at the cornerback spot if they continue to develop him. So I'm with you now. I've got D. Williams on the roster. He's my big addition for you. It's Ty Okada, and that open spot obviously created by Pharaoh Brown starting the year on injured reserve. We'll see what happens. Maybe Brown does make it back for week 1. And if we get that intel, then we certainly can revisit with our final projections if he's going to be on this roster or not. But for now, we don't know the status of that injury. As always, you can follow me on X and Threads at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. Coming up tomorrow, we're going to continue full steam ahead, starting to look at the Cleveland Browns in a game that may have some starters playing for both sides as they have their final tune-up for the regular season. Plus, we'll have a Tuesday mailbag. We know that you 12s have a lot of questions. We'll answer as many as we can. Make sure that you're listening in and enjoy the rest of your Monday night. Go Hawks.